So thank you everyone for being here. My name is Jessica Lori, and I'm the program director at the Interfaith Center at Miami University. And the Interfaith Center is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to invite people from diverse secular, spiritual, and religious traditions to participate in one another's practices in order to cultivate appreciative understanding and friendship. We seek to unify people around common moral, social, and ethical concerns in order to build a more just and equitable society. So tonight we are talking with a special guest. Her name is Kylie Slavik, and we're going to be talking about values-driven marketing. And so you may or may not be a business person. You may or may not own your own business. You may have a business and it may have something to do with spirituality or consciousness, or you may just be a business person who is concerned or wants their own values to be reflected through their business. So there's lots and lots of different scenarios for whom I think this program will be beneficial. And Kylie is the Director of Storytelling and Brand Development at Conscious Marketer. She's one of the most trusted storytelling mentors in the transformational markets and has been part of campaigns generating close to $28 million in her 10-year career as a digital marketer and copywriter. She has a course published with Sounds True, The Power of Conscious Marketing, and has authored many other courses. When she's not attempting to change the world through storytelling and marketing, you'll find her running stairs at the beach, listening to audiobooks, or working out. So welcome, Kylie. It's really great to have you here. And let's get started just by learning a little bit more about you and how you got into this thing called conscious or values-driven marketing.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And I always laugh when people, take my bio and talk about that stair running because most people don't find that to be like a super fun activity, but I am obsessed. So, yeah. Anyhow, I just started laughing when I heard that. Yeah, so I'm happy to share. You mentioned bringing, and by the way, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. And
my pleasure.
I
go ahead. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to get into my story, so you go ahead.
No, we want to hear your story. Let's start with that, and I can share other things later as we go along.
Okay. So essentially what we were when you were talking about bringing spiritual type guests into this program, I thought to myself, so many people can't reconcile the word marketing and the word spiritual. Like they just don't see that it goes together. And for me personally, my personal journey, I started studying with a lot of different spiritual teachers when I was quite young, and I studied with Sufis and Tibetan Buddhists and Maori healers and Hindus and Christians and just like the whole 9 yards. And at that time, I had this belief because I was also a performance artist or performance poet primarily, and I held this belief that if you were doing business at all, if you were doing any kind of marketing, that you were basically destroying the planet. I couldn't see any other way. I would look at these big companies and I would look at oil spills and I would look at all these things and I would think, if you're doing any kind of exchange of money for services, you are destroying the planet. And that's really what I believed for a very long time. And so the result of holding on to that belief system is that I never really had that much of a career and I never really made any money. And after a while, I came to a place where I wanted to make some money, and before that, I had spent about 2 years running a performance poetry venue in Gainesville, Florida, and that was really fun. And I learned how to tell stories and all of that. So I got really good at standing on stage, judging, like seeing, engaging an audience's response to what I was teaching or to what I was saying, and then having to kind of pivot quickly in my delivery or my presentation if they looked bored or uninterested. And what I didn't know, because I was an artist, I didn't know that that was a marketing super skill to be able to learn how to command attention, to get attention. I didn't know that that was a marketing super skill until I started working in this industry from the performance poetry days, and I decided I didn't want to be poor anymore. I got a job working in the industry before I started my own business, and through it, I don't have time to get into the whole story, but through a series of events after getting that first job, and I was a content writer and I told stories, somebody asked me to write a Facebook ad, and I had no idea how to run Facebook ads or write ads, or I wasn't a trained copywriter at that time. But I said I would do it, and then I had 2 days to teach myself how to do it. So I just bought a course and I watched all the videos, and in one weekend I watched something like 22 hours of videos, and then wrote an ad, and then put the ad up and cried because I couldn't resize the photos to fit the news feed and all these other things. I didn't know Facebook doesn't save your work, and so I uploaded all this stuff and then it didn't save, and I just, I was like pulling my hair out. And the client I was working for at that time reached out to me and said that the ad had done $67,500 in 2 days, and we had only spent about $575 in revenue. We'd only spent about $575. And so she asked me, can you keep doing this? Like, what are you doing? She was like, I ran the numbers 3 times. How are you doing this? What are you doing? And I said, of course I can keep doing it, but I had no idea what I was even doing. What I discovered was that those stories that I told as a performance poet really also, they worked in ads and they worked in advertising, and we ended up closing that launch out at $2.5 million in 12 weeks. But more importantly than that, we got 200 women from 30 countries to buy the program, and all of them told me that they were buying the story, they related to the story, they felt resonant with the story. So what I saw there was that stories are not just local, they're universal. People will respond emotionally to stories no matter where they are in the world, no matter what their socioeconomic background is, whatever their race is. Like, people respond to stories. And so I dedicated my life. You say values driven, and it is values driven because to me, telling stories speaks to the highest level potential in somebody. And so in selling, we empower them to make their own decision. And the best way to do that is to tell stories. And so for me, the two are synonymous, like values driven marketing and storytelling are synonymous for me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. And that's obvious in your teaching as well. And just as an aside, what I was going to say earlier is that I have taken courses from Kylie, and that's the reason I asked her to speak, because there's a lot of information here that I think, as a small business person, or even someone in a corporate job, you don't always feel like you're able to share those personal things and that you want to think, this isn't about me, it's about whatever it is that I'm selling.
Yeah.
And yeah. So I don't know, can you share your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, will you say the last part of that again? Because I wasn't thinking about responding to it. Yeah.
Just, how a lot of people are afraid to put themselves in front of their business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're afraid of it. And I think the reason that they're afraid of it is because they don't want to. Well, first, sometimes it's just a literal fear of being in front of it. They say that public speaking is more of a fear than dying. Dying is the number 2 fear, public speaking is the number 1 fear. And so sometimes people just don't want to get on a video, or they don't want to put their story on their website, or they don't want to do a Facebook Live, or they don't want to do something like what we're doing now because they're just afraid. We're just wired to be scared of rejection. I think that's part of it. But the second part that I think is also what I see working with thousands of entrepreneurs is that they're afraid to be too vulnerable. Like, they don't know where that line of vulnerability is, and they think, I've heard that I'm supposed to be vulnerable, but what does that really mean? Do I have to like gut myself? Do I have to expose myself? Do I have to share things that I don't want to share? And you know what I've been saying to that lately is that people don't really want to see that part of us, really. I mean, our close friends and stuff, you know, we share those things with, or our therapist or our family. But what people really want to see is your humanity, not necessarily this like messy guts out, you know, and I'm not criticizing that at all, because I mean, we all have to share that stuff with people or we won't be well human beings. But as far as like a marketing story goes, they just need to see that you're human. So people just want to see that you're good at something. They want to know that you're an expert. They want to know that you know. And then they also want to know that you are have a human side to you.
Mhm. Yep, sure. When we're talking about how do we bring out, and this is a question directly from our program description, is how can you channel creativity and
Yeah.
purpose-driven storytelling at the mindful intersection of spirituality and marketing?
Yeah, so I love that. I feel like we all channel creativity all day long, and that's just kind of like who we are as people. And, you know, that's if you're an engineer, if you're a theologian, if you're a meditator, we're all kind of like tapping into this higher force, unless, of course, we get in our own way. But even then, I think that higher force is still knocking at the door. So, my friend Mike and we used to have this brand, and we talked about I think we called it like a marketing trifecta or something like that. It was a triangle, you know, you could call it whatever you want to call it. But triangles are reoccurring in all religions and all faiths. You see this sort of triangle. And so what we really came up with was this triangle of spirit, science, and story. And we realized that every marketing campaign had to have all three. So there's that spirit that comes through, that comes to us. You know, for me, it's like it's inconvenient, right? It's like, I'm trying to sleep right now. Thanks a lot. You know, like, do I really need to get up and write this down? And I find that if I don't write it down, I forget it. So I try to, you know, I once wrote a poem, a spoken word piece at like 2:30 in the morning, because I got woken up and I couldn't fall back asleep. And so I finally wrote it and then I fell back asleep. So I think how channeling creativity comes for different people is going to look different, but that's kind of how it looks for me. And then the science part of it is really about kind of creating a frame for it, or looking at what is working, what is not working. You know, if we're looking at purpose-driven storytelling, yes, and marketing, of course I want to hit it every time. I want to tell a story and I want it to work and I want everyone to like it and I want it to sell and I want it to do, and I think that because I've been doing this for 10 years that it should do all of those things right away on the first try. And that's just not reality. It's not reality for me. I've been doing this for a really long time. It's not reality for our clients that we help, who primarily have multi-million dollar businesses and their agency clients. And it doesn't work for the other clients that we teach through our group programs. So the science aspect of it, and I'm really bad at science and I'm really bad at math. So when I say science, it's not like chemistry or physics or something intimidating. It's really just metrics, looking at what works. Why does it work? Why does it not work? Collecting some data, getting some information, and making changes based on that. And when I was talking about being a spoken word artist, I could see in real time what that feedback was. I'd be standing on stage and I'd be sort of pouring my guts out. And I know I told you not to pour your guts out, but that's what I did as an artist. And so I think art is a great place for that. But not always marketing, but art is. And I would see people, sometimes people would be so engaged and literally leaning forward in their chairs and like smiling when it was supposed to be a smile and laughing when it was funny and crying when it was sad. Other times I would go on stage and people would just look like they were about to yawn. And I had to learn, that was my science. That was my data. That was my data of this poem is not really relating to people. They're not getting it. So there's two things that would happen. A, I would try to pivot in the moment I can't change the poem because I memorized it and I wrote it, and I'm not good enough to just be like fluid like that. Some people are. But can I change my delivery? Can I change my tone? Can I change how I'm speaking? Can I change my body language? Is there something I can do to become more relatable? In marketing, I do have time. I can change it. I can see that 85 times I tell a story and I tell it this way and they love it. 10 times I tell a story this way and they hate it. I'm going to go with the 85. So that's, my answer to that. I don't know if that gives you what you're looking for, but it's that spirit science story thing. And so also just adding stories to it, and I think I did, but really including all three of those things. We don't want to have the science and the story without the spirit. We don't want to have two of them without the third. It doesn't work. It loses that magic. So hopefully that was helpful of what you're looking for.
Yeah, and if you're looking at, let's say it is some sort of a business that it may, like I said, we may have people watching who have their own business, and maybe, let's say they're a massage therapist.
Yeah.
And they, that's not really about spirituality, but there certainly seems to be a deep level of trust, a deep level of connection between the two people. And so you want, I think I would want my values to be reflected in however it is that I'm reaching out to people to try to get clients. So can you kind of give us an idea of how might someone use a story to put maybe not even a Facebook ad, but let's just say it's somebody that just wants to put a Facebook post and they
Yeah.
want their values reflected, but they want people to know what they do. How could you use a story, or what might that look like?
Yeah, I love it. So I'll give you an example of Apple, and then I'll get into the more, the people who are here and the massage therapy and stuff. So Apple, you love them or you hate them. That's pretty much the response. Maybe some people are neutral, but it's usually you love them or you hate them. And that is fine. Being polarizing is fine. But I kind of superimposed my own story onto what I believe they value and how they share that. And I believe it's really close to the truth. So the way that I see Apple's brand story is that so back then in the 80s they became a company. They probably started to become a successful company in the 90s, and I grew up in the 90s, and I was an artist and I was a poet and I was a writer, and everybody would say, I'd say I want to be a writer. I'm going to get an English degree. My brother, on the other hand, was going to be an engineer, so he would say I'm going to be an engineer, and everyone thought that was so great. And when I said I was going to be an English major, nobody thought that was so great. It was back in a time where the humanities and the arts were really looked down on. And if you weren't going to be an attorney or you weren't going to be a doctor, then people thought you're crazy. So what happened was Apple came along and they saw that, and they saw how the artists were looked down upon. And they basically created a brand story around their computers, because it's just a computer. It's not a big deal. It's a laptop, it's a phone. It's not people sleep outside of the Apple store to get the newest iPhone. How did that happen, right? So it happened because of their story. It certainly didn't happen because of their hardware. In fact, a lot of people who work on computers have told me their hardware sucks. So it's definitely not because of how the computers work. So I believe that their story is essentially that even the artists, or even the weird ones, or even the creative people can have power, they can have contribution, they can have value, and they can make a difference in the world. And that is Apple telling a story based on their values. They're valuing creativity, they're valuing art, they're valuing people that want to make a contribution but might not be doing it in the way that is taught by the world. These people used to be on the fringes. It's not like that anymore, but it used to be that way. And so they came along and they said that. And if you look at who uses Apple computers, Hollywood, music industry, people in the arts, internet marketers, digital marketers, right? it's not banks, it's not schools, it's not airplanes, right? Those more left-brained, harder, science-oriented, schools, like they're all on PC still. But people in the arts at a huge level are on Apple. And they did it, with this story. And if you look at any of their commercials, any of their advertising campaigns, you're going to see this sort of, you're going to see this undertone to the story of what I'm talking about now, of how do you tap into your highest level of creativity, even if you're somebody that isn't valued by the culture. So that's a really powerful story. And because of it, they've created not just brand users, but brand, like almost crazy brand people, like people who have to have the next thing and the next thing because those people felt a certain way and now they feel a certain way. And so if you can feel that if you can create an emotional experience for people in the direction that they want to feel, you are golden. So that's one way that you can tell your story, is to figure out what are the emotions that people want to feel, and how can I tell a story from my own life about when I did not feel that way and how I became, what was the journey that I went on to now feeling this way. So in a massage-based business, that might look like feeling stressed out, feeling anxious, not feeling fragmented, not feeling like I'm taking care of myself, right? You want to think of, why are people coming to me? And what do they want? And what do they want to feel? And when did I feel how they feel now? And how did I change that? And so for me, a lot of from the story that we talked about earlier of my story, a lot of our clients, not our agency clients, because they've established their businesses for a longer period of time, and they probably started out this way, but they're not there anymore, where a lot of our clients do not like marketing. They hate it. In fact, they think it's horrible and they don't want to do it. And so when we're telling stories about marketing to our clients to get them inspired enough to work with us, we have to talk about how we had resistance to marketing, or how we didn't think that healing and marketing could go together, or we didn't think that marketing could be spiritual. And we have to do this over and over and over again in different ways. So that's a little bit of a snapshot of a story that I shared with you in the beginning of this. I didn't get into it too deeply, but I could have told you that story for 30 minutes and filled in all the details. Or I could have picked different pieces out of it depending on who I was speaking to and depending on what I thought that what you wanted to feel, or what direction that you needed inspiration in. And I would have matched those details to that. So a really good frame for telling a story is like, what do these people want? And how did I used to feel that way? How did I get it? And where am I at now? And the values piece just kind of comes through. Like you can be deliberate like Apple and say, hey, these are our values, and we're going to frame a story around it, and we're going to frame hundreds of different stories around it, and they're going to be different commercials and different magazine spreads and different social posts, but they're all going to point to the same thing. And that is that creative people can matter and be important and make a contribution. Or you can look at where your people want to be and how did you get there personally. And I guarantee you, in sharing that story, you are going to automatically be sharing your values, because your journey of going from one situation to another, you're going in the direction of your values all the time. You might not be living them perfectly, but as you grow as a person and as you move towards your own growth, you are growing around your values. And so it might not be as obvious, but it's implicit in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how would you say, as far as aligning your business values with your personal values, do you think they should be the same? Or do you think that, do you have any kind of recommendation for people to create a list of values that they're going to kind of use as a guideline for their business?
Yeah, I think that personal values do not have to be the same as company values or business values or brand values. A lot of times they're not going to be, and a lot of times they are going to be. For me personally, so I work with an agency called Conscious Marketer. It's not my company. I had my own business before I started working with them. I align with most of the company values. But when I stated my values for my business is a little different. And my own personal values are like an 80% overlap with both of them, but there's some things that I value that aren't important to my business. So in order to kind of start to look at it, I think that you can look at things like for your business. You can look at things like, why did you start it? Like, what did you see either in your own personal life or in the world that was missing or that you were passionate about, which is those two things are why people usually start a business. They're passionate about something or they see something that's missing and they want to fill that hole. So when you really list all of that out, how do you then, like, how does that inform what your values really are? If I started my business because I'm passionate about storytelling, then I might be able to look at that and say, okay, so one of my values is creative expression, you know, because that just kind of like naturally comes out of a passion for storytelling. It's like, if I love this, I probably value creativity. If I start a company in marketing to share the truth with people because I think that the way that marketing is being done is really unhealthy for people and for the planet and it's manipulative, then naturally I'm going to see that I value truth. I value integrity, right? Because so those are two different ways. Like, why did you start it? And those are two different reasons that people start things, because they are excited about it or because they're not excited about something else that they see. And then another way that I think you can look at your values is what does your what do you or what does your business stand for? I can call this like, what are you putting a stake in the ground for? And usually when you ask people what they're putting a stake in the ground for, they can come up with something pretty quickly because it's the driving force of their whole entire life. And for me, it's interesting because I work in digital marketing, but what I put a stake in the ground for is has more to do with environmental justice than anything else. But I find that the best way to influence the most amount of people to create what I believe would be best for humanity at this time is through marketing. And that's why I teach it. And that's why I teach it to really spiritual people, because I believe they're going to go and make a difference in the way that is aligned with what I think needs to happen. So sometimes you're going to find that deeply personal value, like in that case, is very coincidental with your business value. You know, in that case, my deeply personal value is coming out through the business that I choose to start and dedicate my life to and spend that 30 to 50 hours a week on. Another thing that you can do is look at what your message is. Now, primarily I'm speaking to business. I can speak to personal in a second, although I'm kind of weaving that in too. But what is the message? When I just gave you the example of Apple, I gave you a really succinct message for a complicated company. And that message is creative people can matter and make a difference and contribute. Another company, love it or hate it, Nike. Some people like them, some people don't. They are one of the best brand storytellers I've ever seen. And I'm not going to tell you if I like them or not because it's besides the point. But I will say they are not successful because of the design of their shoes, although they do care about that because I read the book and I found out they do care. They're successful because of their story. So the message of Nike is essentially, with a little bit of hard work and determination, anyone can be great. And that's my words. But if you look at their commercials, they have this little mini hero's journey in every commercial of somebody that's an unlikely hero, becoming a hero, becoming heroic because they were willing to work at it. So Nike is not saying anyone is great, everybody's great, you can all climb the mountain and you can all win the race. No, they're not saying it's easy. They're saying it's hard. But they're saying if you're willing to put in the work and you're willing to do the hard work, you can accomplish whatever you want to accomplish. That's a story people want to believe in, and that's why they buy Nike shoes. But again, it's like, what's your message? That's their message. You know, that's their well-intended, well-crafted message. So really ask yourself, what's my message? And can I put my message in a sentence or two? You know, it doesn't need to be a book. And in fact, if you can't put it in a sentence or two, it might be too complicated. I heard somebody say, if you can't explain the truth to a 4-year-old, it's not the truth. So really a lot of times we want to be simple, you know, with these types of things, but you want to look at your values. Like, so if you want to look at your values, look at your message. So with Nike, it's like they value hard work. They value greatness. They value accomplishment. And I wouldn't even say like they value talent. It's not even about that. It's not even about, you know, even though like really talented people they endorse really talented people, it's less about talent. It's more about hard work. It's less about skill. It's more about hard work, determination, perseverance. And so if you look at your message, you can then see what values are coming out of your message. And then I like to give this 60-second exercise to people where I ask people, it can be morbid, but it's actually very cool. And I ask them, if you had 60 seconds to live, what do you want to say to humanity? Like, this is it. This is your last minute. What do you want to say? What is your message that you want to leave behind? And I've had people come to me and say that they don't know what their message is. And then I asked them this question right on the spot and they weren't expecting it and they didn't have time to think about it. And all of a sudden it comes out. They're like, "Oh my God, this is what I want to say. Like, this is what I want to leave people with. You know, this is what I want to leave behind. This is what I believe in." And I do believe that you can really find your values in that as well. You know, you can really do it. So those are 4 different ways. To recap, why did you start it? What does it stand for? What's the message? And then what do you want to say to humanity? Those are 4 different ways you can find your business values, or if it's a practice or a healing practice or whatever the work is that you do. Those are some ways you can find it. And then on a personal level, I think you kind of already know, you know, just think about like, what do you spend your time doing? Because that's what you value. You know, do you spend your time meditating? Well, maybe that's because you value truth, or maybe it's because you value peace, or maybe it's because you value self-care. But if you spend an hour every single day meditating, then I know that you value that. And so my question to you is, why do you value it? And so maybe you spend 4 hours a day with your family because you value family time, you value connection, you value meaning. So really just asking yourself, what do you do with your time? What are you doing with your life? And that's where you can find your values, and perhaps they overlap with your business and perhaps they do not. But even if you made one of those circles, you know, like one of those Venn diagrams, and you put your personal values on one side and your business values on the other, and then in that 20% in the middle, you could see where they overlap, and those would be the ones I would focus on for the business values, because you don't want to have like 40 values. You just really want 3 or 4 in your business.
I have a question about the word authenticity. I know with especially almost all marketing is digital these days. I'm mostly. And so how do you, compete in this world of everyone is now able to be a marketer? And I keep hearing that, the content is what matters on social media marketing, and that, that you want to go and try to be as authentic as possible. And what does that mean from a marketing standpoint?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that I would say. The first is that there may be thousands of people with your message, but there's nobody with your story. So your story will stand out no matter how many people are doing what you're doing, and it will always be authentic because it's your story. And so that's a really important thing. Now, with what you addressed with authenticity and content, that's super important. And gosh, when I first started out on the internet 10 years ago, people were just putting up memes. And that's all you needed to do to have a business, like they were just putting up memes and they were just putting up listicles and infographics, and it was like that's all they needed. They were becoming leaders in their business. And that definitely doesn't work anymore. I mean, people could share a meme wide and far and it can go viral, but for business, it doesn't do anything for business, really. So nowadays, that's not the answer to the problem of like, how do I get attention on my brand? How do I get people to buy into what I'm doing? And so you do need to have content, and it does need to be authentic. Not too long ago, after all you had to do was have a meme, is that then people would do things like the 3 best ways to do this, or the 5 ways to have that, or you'd see all this stuff, and that content did really well. And now nobody wants to see it anymore. They're bored, they're burned out, they're sick of it. It's like they're tired of it. And so from my perspective, being authentic is really about sharing content that inspires your audience. Okay, and there's actually, I have a list of ways that you can do that. And you always want to reverse engineer from where your people want to go, what results they want, and what they want to feel. And you want to reverse engineer from there to, this idea of where are they now and how can you get them from where they are now to where they want to go. That is marketing in a nutshell. If you can do that, you're rocking it out. But how do you fill that gap in from where they are to where they want to go? There's a couple ways you can do it authentically. You can educate. So you can educate people on their problem, why they have it, why things they've tried in the past haven't worked, why what you're offering can work. So that's something that you can do. Again, you could tell stories or content around your values. We've already talked about that for a good amount of time, so I won't deep dive into that. You can answer questions that they might have. And one of the best ways to find out what questions they have would literally be to ask them. If you are working with people or have worked with people in the past, you look at the problems that they have and you ask them questions about it. How long have you been having this for? What have you tried to resolve it? How did that happen? What happened when you tried it? How did it make you feel? How did getting that result make you feel? And on and on and on and on. And so you can answer their questions in your content. And you can work through doubts or concerns that they might have about the type of work that you do. So I don't know how much marketing education some of you have. You're probably all in different places with it, but there's a word in marketing called objections. And objections is just a reason that somebody is saying that they don't want to buy what you have. I don't really use that word. I would look at maybe doubts, or my friend, one of my friend's companies, they call it concerns, like concerns that people have. Maybe it's doubts. So some of your content can address those doubts that people have, that you hear. I can't afford it. It's not the right time. I've tried something like this before and it didn't work. I don't know if my family wants me to do it, right? So there's all these things that people say to say no. And so I have this theory that people do not have objections or doubts about your actual work. They have it to their own growth. And so if somebody clicks on an ad or comments on a social post or watches a video on a certain topic, they're already indicating that they're interested. And so if they're indicating their interest, then they want the thing, right? And if later on they say, I don't want the thing, when they've indicated that they want it, they're, in my opinion and from what I've seen, they have fear about the growth that's available for them with working with you. So they're not objecting to your offer, or services, they're objecting to themselves and their own growth. And so when I say create content that helps them to work through their doubts or concerns, that's what I'm speaking into. What are the specific ways that your clients or that your audience says no to themselves? And you can create content around that. It's a very powerful thing to do because they don't even realize oh, you're speaking to what I'm about to say to you, but it helps them to process inside of themselves that, oh my gosh, I'm saying no to myself in this way, and maybe I don't want to. Maybe I want to grow. So those are just a couple of ideas of what you can do in terms of creating authentic content. And if you we like to in our emails, especially, I could give you like 30 more bullet points there. But we have like a running list of content things that we do. And in our email campaigns, we just use every single email to hit up one of those concepts. So we don't try to stuff too much into our emails or our social posts or our ads. We try to put one of them into every piece of content and not like 4 of them or 3 of them. And that way you kind of can rotate through and it gives you endless content, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great suggestions. And I had the one that you mentioned of asking your customers questions. I did that at one time. I selected, I think I picked 10 different clients and asked them the same questions. And I found out some really fascinating similarities. They were all different demographics. And one thing that I recognized that out of 10, 6 of them stated that one of their greatest fears in life was that life would be finished before they got to do all the things they wanted to do, which told me they're not spending their time now how they want to be spending it. So just some interesting things that from a marketing perspective, it kind of changed the way that I was speaking to them. And
so it's super interesting. Yeah, it's super interesting. And you will find those commonalities. And so that's why I always say, let's not guess, let's ask.
Yeah, it really it helped me to understand them better also. And the other thing I noticed was how much they and I have in common. That a lot of times with small businesses, we're marketing to people like ourselves,
Unsurprising that's the case, even in product development, that can be the case too. The person who's creating the product attracts people like them. It's easy to see it in services more, but it's even true in products to a certain degree. So
yep, absolutely. I wanted to mention, I did not at the beginning, if there is anyone who is listening or is on the call who would like to ask questions. Kylie, do you have any other things you'd like to continue with? If so, we can put them questions in the chat, or if there's anyone who wants to just raise your hand and ask a live question, I think that would be okay too.
Yeah, if anyone wants to raise their hand and ask, I'm happy to help. And if not, then we can jump back into just chatting.
Hi, I just had a question. I'm Alexandra, by the way. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to all of us. I was just curious if for your business specifically and the education that you're sharing, what types of businesses or different entrepreneurs are coming to you for the type of education you're providing. I know it, of course, stems from different spiritual practices, but is it more like physical, like yoga and Tai Chi, for instance, or other types of brands and companies?
Yeah, so we have 2 levels of clientele. I'll tell you our agency clients and then our training, our clients that come into our programs. This year we worked with Sufi healers, we worked with trauma therapists, we did a documentary launch called The Wisdom of Trauma with Dr. Gabor Mate. We did Hawaiian shaman program. So a lot of what they're launching is programs, like educational programs. We did a Hawaiian shaman. We did a Tai Chi program. We did acupressure program. So those are a lot of the clients that come to us. And I think we do have a client. I'm not a part of it. We do have a client that is not in the spiritual space. I can't remember what it is that they're selling. And I don't actually work with them. But usually it's like some kind of spiritual educational program. That's what we're selling at the agency level. At the people that come into our actual programs that we've done, that we train them how to do their own marketing. We don't do it for them. It's kind of the same types of people. So we do work with practitioners. So like massage therapists, acupuncturists, Reiki practitioners. We have a shamanic dog trainer in our course right now, which I thought was really interesting. And different people like that. We're going to attract a lot of people. We have coaches. We're going to attract a lot of people that are in some kind of spiritual service providership and or people that have online programs. The way that we do our marketing alienates people that are not doing good things with their business. Like we deliberately weed those people out. And people that are doing good things in the world but maybe aren't strongly spiritual are not so attracted to us either. So we're definitely getting those people that are doing some kind of spiritual practice, want to make the world a better place, and have either a product or service that they want to sell.
Okay, thank you. That's really interesting.
Yeah, sure. Anyone else?
One thing that you just said kind of reminded me of earlier in the conversation. We were talking about weeding people out that you don't want as a client versus someone who's holding themselves back. And sometimes the person, I think, that is holding back and maybe limiting themselves from your service, it could be absolutely that they're not ready for it, or, and so that the fear from a marketing standpoint of weeding too many people out. Can you talk a little bit from your perspective about niche and how you determine who that is and who's ready and who isn't?
Yeah, so I think that there is something that we say in marketing that you're either speaking, like if you're speaking to everyone, you're speaking to no one. So you really want to speak to one person and then kind of speak to as many of that one person as you possibly can. And so you want to get really, really clear on who your person is. And then everybody else you kind of do weed out in a sense. And that's good. So you have a better chance of reaching millions of people by defining that one person than if you try to define 2 people or 3 people or just everybody. You'll never reach 1 million people that way because nobody will resonate with what you're saying. Because if they don't resonate with what you're saying, then they're not going to take any further action. And even in the shoe and computer example that I gave, they alienate a lot of people, and they're $1 trillion company. Well, Apple is a $1 trillion company who alienated entire industries, banks, airplanes, schools, like these huge customers. They could have gone after them, but then they wouldn't have had all these like massive brand fans. So, however, within that group of people, right, you're calling it a niche, and that's a word for it. And within that group of people that falls under that one person, then there's going to be people in that group that are not ready. And they're not ready to say yes. And so what I do is I don't try to sell to them if they're not ready. But what I do is I continue to educate them. I continue to put content in front of them that's going to educate them about why their limitations aren't serving them, or about why they're really important and needed, and they should step into a bigger, they should play a bigger game. Or so I'm going to educate them about things. I'm going to share my values. I'm going to tell stories. I'm going to continue to serve content to them until they become ready. And if they never become ready, it's okay, because I just gave somebody great content, and that's never a bad thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions for Kylie while we're here live?
Hi, I'm Eric
Hi,
Jordan,
Eric.
and
Hi, Eric.
hey, so I've got a business that is product based, and it's a product that is gonna do a lot of good, but it's not inherently a spiritual or personal development based product. Like, I have my own spiritual practice,
Yeah.
and there's the business product that is its own thing. And so what suggestions or advice would you have for marketing something that will have a meaningful impact, but not necessarily to a clientele that you might say is part of this subculture that we all seemingly belong to? I want
Yeah.
to reach broader.
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can use all the principles that we talked about today, but you just get really clear on who you're talking to and what that specific person is, and that demographic that's going to be a massive brand fan. And then, going narrow in that way to reach broader is going to be really important. Like Apple defined their audience was going to be young artists. And then those young artists spread that message for them. They evangelized, right? I don't think that's the right way to say that word, but they became brand ambassadors. So what you want to do is create brand ambassadors. And the way that you can start to, without knowing your product, the way that you can do it is really look at who are the most likely people to adopt this product. Who are the people who are most likely to just go bananas over it?
Well, we have the advantage of so it's an innovation in irrigation that should save like 50% more water
It's amazing.
off of what the most efficient thing on the market is right now. I can't go into detail because it's
Yeah.
in the patent process, but the market is anyone who has landscaping or gardening in a drought affected state, like literally anyone.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then, it's also going to be pushed along as more local regions are creating like water limitations. Like, water rationing is going on, the price of water is going up, there's fines associated with overuse. Certain counties are like banning lawns, and it's like, if you have a green lawn, you're getting ticketed.
Wow.
And this kind of stuff would solve all those problems, essentially offer a neat and tidy solution that would be to, otherwise you're going to get fined by the government type of thing. Here's a product that solves that problem.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's amazing. So obviously farmers are going to care more because it's a life or death situation for them in terms of like, can they live? Does their farm make it another year?
Yeah.
And I live in California, so I see this all the time with the droughts and the farms. And then people with their lawns would be like secondary, I would think. However,
Yeah, it would be like gardeners,
yeah,
landscapers, and
yeah,
farmers, and
yeah.
probably focused around homeowners who have landscaping would be like the folks to market to, is my thinking.
Yeah, so I think that's awesome, and thank you for doing that for the world. It's really powerful. And here's all you really need to do. The marketing is the product. It's like, hey, this is what this can do for you, and it kind of sells itself in a sense. It's not a hard sell. But what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to show that the product and that your company, whoever you're doing this with, your business partners, you're going to have to put a face on it, and you're going to have to show that you're trustworthy, because even when you're saving people money and saving them water, they're so used to doing it a certain way that there's part of the brain that feels unsafe by switching products. And especially some of these people are going to be older, and they're going to actually say, let's just wait it out another year. Let's not switch. It's really hard to get people to even switch a brand of toothpaste, like really, really hard. They don't do it, even when the benefits are there. So My suggestion to you, how many business partners do you have in this?
3.
So my suggestion is you come up with a really good story about how you discovered the product and why it matters and how you care, why you care about, saving money and why you care about helping these people and who you are, because you want to show them, you want them to relate to you as humans, because if they relate to you as humans, they're going to overcome all those like, oh, I don't like change and I don't want to do something different and I don't know about this. I know we're almost out of time, but I'll give you an example. I had a client who had an Eco Strips laundry company, and it was a little tiny strip. And it was so small, people didn't believe it worked, but also getting people to switch laundry detergent is like impossible. Plus, it was more expensive. And so, what we did, and there's all these other eco brands, but this was a zero waste brand. But still, I could say zero waste laundry, and still, people, environmentalists, are still like, yeah, but I already use this brand. And so I asked him, why did you start this business? How did it come to be? And he said, oh, well, I was sitting there one day with my kid watching YouTube while my wife was passed out because she just had one of our babies. And my kid is watching this show on toys, and the toys, so I was watching, and this little kid was testing out a toy, and it came in plastic, and he opened the plastic box, and it was a plastic box, and he opened the plastic box, and there was another piece of plastic, and then the toy was plastic, and it went on and on and on about how he was just horrified, right, by the impact. And so the story goes on to talk about why he started this zero waste company and how he cares about his kids and the future of his kids and their life. And now all of a sudden people are like, oh my God, this guy really cares. This guy's just like me and he really cares and he's so cool. Now they don't care anymore that they don't want to switch brands because nobody wants to switch brands because it's boring and it's unsafe and all this kind of stuff. So I think that you guys just need to come up with a really good story of like how you, like a discovery story, how you discovered it, why it matters, how it can help. And I really think that that's all you have to do, because you just have to cut through people's lizard part of their brain that just feels unsafe making decisions like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Yeah. I think that will help you a lot. Sit down and write that story of why you're doing this and how you discovered it, and you'll be good.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And it's not going to be hard to be successful with that. That's really cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right. We are about out of time. So Kylie, I know you've got some workshops coming up, and I believe a free 5-part series coming up.
We do.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we're doing a 5-part live stream on launching and storytelling. My business partner, who's done hundreds and hundreds of launches in the past couple of years, probably sold well over 100 million just in the last 3 years alone. And I'm doing the stories, he's doing the launching. We're talking about the hero's journey. And if you want information about it, I don't have the link offhand because it just got made today. But if you wanted information on it, you could join our Facebook group. It's called The Marketer's Path. And if you had follow-up questions for me too, you could join that group and ask me. Like, I feel like, Eric, I feel like we didn't get to dive as deep as I would have liked to, but if you have follow-up questions you want to ask, you can just hit me up in that group.
All right, I'm joining it now.
Cool. Yeah, awesome.
What was the name of the group again?
It's called The Marketer's Path.
Okay.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. Like I said, I've taken courses with Kylie and her partner, and Richard Taubin is his name. Is it Taubin?
Taubinger.
Taubinger, yes, Taubinger.
Yeah.
I forgot the little last part. Richard Taubinger, yes, they're both excellent instructors, and I learned a lot for my own personal business, and it's highly recommended that you join the group and check them out.
Yeah, so thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here, and thank you for everyone who's here on the call, and everyone have a wonderful evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.